Hi, everyone, and welcome to AB Conversations, where we will help you CFP your way out of it. A podcast where you get into the minds of a couple certified financial planners on how we think and feel about everyday financial planning questions and what should really matter most to you. A healthier financial life starts now. Hey, Adam. Discussion today. You and I had a little talk not too long ago, just how much retirement planning we do that just sits with this baseline assumption that somebody's going to age in place. We'll ask the question, when it comes to the house and where you're going to be and what you're going to do, we just make that assumption. And I think the reality is in planning is that most people don't just decide to downsize someday because they woke up and were excited to leave the family home. It's quite the opposite. Maybe somebody passes away, the maintenance becomes too much, things just get difficult. So this is a huge asset in somebody's life. We as planners, I don't know where this conversation is going to go today on feeling like concrete advice, but we ought to bring awareness to this is eventually going to be a discussion. And I think the sooner we can talk about it, because we'll get into some of the financials, the better off somebody's going to be. So let's just see where the conversation takes us today on this, the house and downsizing and the role it plays in retirement in the later stages of life.
Yeah, and it's the reality of this just being one of the financial assets that somebody accumulates over a lifetime potentially that has the emotional component to it, right? I can't recall a conversation that we sat down with a client saying, I don't know what I'm going to do with my 401k as I'm getting older, and I feel the emotional attachment to my, my workplace retirement plan. That's probably not going to be the case. But you're right, there is for many people, it is many years of accumulation of things, of memories, of gathering, and you name it. People have a much different attachment to what could be for many people a very large portion, of their net worth, right, of their financial life. And we certainly don't want to minimize that. But I think anecdotally, we've kind of seen this with different clients. That idea of downsizing doesn't always work out financially, that it is, the windfall that maybe it once was. And I don't know if that's just dynamics of the world that we live in right now, the economy that we're in, just the way the housing market has moved over the last decades. I think that initial idea of I'm going to have the family home, I'm going to retire, I don't need the big property, all of the upkeep that goes along with it, I'm going to sell it and I'm going to buy something much cheaper that's more suited to me. And what we've been seeing is sometimes it doesn't necessarily turn into that much cheaper subsequent purchase. Sometimes it's a lateral move, but what you're trading monetarily is for some of that peace of mind. It's less maintenance, it's less upkeep, it's hopefully less surprises that come with maybe owning a bigger property or a larger house. And you're trading that for some more certainty. But it's not always the slam dunk obvious decision.
Well, and doesn't that just make it all the harder to kind of come to some conclusion if it's not just, hey, this is a good financial thing for me because it'll be a little bit of a windfall. We can move into something that might, be more independent living. And for that, I'm giving up this place where there are all these milestones, holidays, was where we raised our kids. Maybe the house has been in the family forever. Doesn't it make it so much harder when you're actually maybe feeling forced to make this decision, right? If you can't live independently, if it's become too much, maybe it's after the first spouse passes away. And then put on top of that, by the way, this isn't going to be a windfall for you. It's going to cost you more money to move to some other place where now, maybe there is the good of getting some assistance or maybe not having to upkeep a property. But by the way, we didn't really build it into your plan that it's going to cost you extra money after you sell your home. I mean, that's a tough spot.
Yeah. Well, and then, I guess a great point there just being so much better to be, if you're potentially facing this decision, so much better for that to be on your own timeline where you can control a lot of the factors, right? And maybe it is just that, it's just the timing aspect of it. But yes, we've certainly seen this too, where what's the saying? Failing to plan is planning to fail, or whatever the fun terminology is. But we've seen that, right? Where you get to a certain point and yes, either health declines or somebody passes away and it forces the sale of a property. And at that point, options are removed and may not always have worked out in the ideal situation if it would have been a more conscious decision up front.
Yeah, and what makes this conversation hard to have too is all family dynamics are different. Again, on what that house means and to how many
Hmm.
different people it means something to. But I think that's why, I mean, we just had a conversation, 2 hours ago where there seems to be some really proactive planning where there are those discussions, where this
Hmm.
house has been in the family for more than one generation, currently lived in by, somebody in that family, but now things are going to have to change. And at least they're doing, I would say, the good work of going, okay, here's what this means to the estate. Here's what this means to this blended family. Here's what this may mean to you financially. Because more often than not, I think we are often in this situation where we hear what the parents think, but we don't really know what the kids think. And what we often see when we're brought into that equation is, yeah, kids appreciate the memories, but nobody's going to live in that house. And now it's got to be liquidated anyway. And now maybe there would have been a better way to go about it.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that I don't know. Is that a generational thing? Because I agree, and we've seen it, right? Where it is, we see the parents in this situation making that decision to say, no, I'm gonna stay, I'm gonna age in place because I want this house to go to my kids, but have never had the conversation with their kids to know, do they want this house? Because that would
Right.
be, in my mind, that would be the worst case scenario, is that now somebody's going to make decisions that aren't necessarily in their best interest in order to preserve something for the next generation. And the next generation, when they inherit it, go, well, I don't want this, so it's going to get sold. And now, or where we could have been and maybe in a much different spot, 10, 15 years earlier. That's my fear.
Yeah, and I'm gonna take this to a different spot, Adam, but just had a conversation last night with one of our clients, socially, but we had conversations with her a little while ago that, okay, now mom can't age in place. This client had this second
Mm,
property that she was looking to age in place in, but now is thinking, I'm going to have my mom come there. But there's this whole greater plan of, well, how do we pay for this? There's another sibling, but she owns the property, meaning our client, and
mm,
she has to do all these renovations, right? So now there's a heck of a lot of projection here going into, well, if you're going to make all these renovations to get this property to where somebody very senior can live, that does change the marketability later in life for that home, right? Because that may not be now suited for a more traditional family. So there's just lots and lots of conversations, and this conversation can go any number of directions when we just think about the role of that home, a property, and the value of that, and what it's going to mean to somebody's individual plan and the next generation.
yeah.
Sorry, just made me think of that story.
No, that's it's the perfect example where it can get very muddy very quickly. And even, maybe you touched on it a little bit there, just something as simple as, what are the tax implications of downsizing? We know for most people, at least in our area here, a married couple can exempt up to $500,000 of capital gains on their primary property. That's not out of the realm of, again,
Hmm.
in this area. Maybe that plays a role if the house has just grown in value over a very long period of time. But there is also the other side of, if you don't downsize and you decide to age in place, there is the benefit that if it is inherited, there is that step up in cost basis. So in theory, that is a better tax situation than your heirs, inheriting in early or having to pay taxes, or yourself maybe having to pay taxes. So there are some dynamics there too. But I wouldn't want that to be the driving force in this decision, right? We're approaching this from the standpoint of, yes, it is a financial decision, but it's, for us, it's not so much about the dollars and cents. It's what makes sense for this person's plan. And by plan, I mean, what would they want to see happen? In an ideal world, what would, if they could wave the magic wand, what would they want that to look like? And then let's figure out the financial path that we need to take to get
Yeah.
there, rather than let's just focus on the tax side of things and let the tax tail kind of wag everything else.
Yeah, and I can almost hear you saying this in a different conversation, but it's that whole, you have to take care of yourself first, right? If the plane is going down, put your life vest on before you're going and helping anybody else. And maybe that's, some of the focus here. If we're speaking directly to our clients here, not the next generation, part of this has to be what is going to serve you best, recognizing that you may have thoughts for that next generation. And yes, let's talk about capital gains. Let's talk about what happens if this house now gets split in three ways if you do nothing different. But I
Yeah.
think it is, we want to have this conversation with our clients earlier so that they can think about what is going to serve them best and make that the focus. Because all too often, and it's a wonderful thing, but all too often we do hear, well, what is this going to mean for the kids, and how do I make sure that this is efficient for them? That's great, but not unless we're taking care of you first. And again, we gave some couple examples here where downsizing in space is not often downsizing in financials.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and even not to drag this on further, but even in a recent scenario that we've seen, somebody downsizing, right, selling the property to go into an independent living situation, sometimes it's just the logistics, right? If somebody doesn't have the lump sum of available cash outside of, the equity in their home, or if a lot of that wealth is tied up in a retirement account, in an IRA or a 401k, that can create some other subsequent planning concerns just to come up with the cash that may be needed to purchase that next property. And maybe this is more of a problem when it is going into either assisted living or independent living, where there is that much, much bigger lump sum needed up front, maybe even before you would sell your property.
Yeah, thank you for going there. Here I am, like, sticking on all the emotional things, and you're bringing some financial wisdom to all this, because that is becoming far more popular, right? It is, that baby boomer generation, these senior living communities that intend to
Yeah.
have people live independently for a while. We know a lot of people that are drawn to that, not only because there is a degree of socialization, especially as maybe kids and grandkids are spread out all over the place in the world. Now there is a community where they can be active, where meals are there, there's entertainment, there's, good socialization, but it
Mm-hmm.
also
Mm-hmm.
provides them with some sort of backstop that if I do start to need some assistance, I'm still within that community, but maybe I'm shifting around. But to your good point,
Yeah.
that usually takes some resources on the front end.
Not only just some resources on the front end, but it's also, I guess the name of the theme I'm trying to get across here is just to be proactive, right? To be able
Yeah.
to have the conversation. We're hoping that people will start to think about this if they haven't already. They don't need to decide today, right? I'll say the retirees that we are mainly talking about, or that we work with in that, you know, 55 to 70 range, maybe aren't quite there at the downsizing phase yet, but I think the thoughts are probably starting there with conversations we are having.
Yeah.
So again, you don't have to have your final decision made, but start to explore what's possible, or maybe what you would want to see happen at some point in the future, so that if some changes are needed now with some
Yeah.
runway, great. Let's be proactive and make those adjustments when you do have the time. Again, maybe going back to earlier part of the conversation, that's usually one of those worst case scenarios where if you don't have an idea of what you'd like, and then you're trying to make that decision when it's too late, when you're kind of forced into that situation, then we just know a lot of those options kind of vanish.
Well, and I don't want to compound the conversation here, but for those people that listen to every podcast, we just spoke very recently on the complexities of life and this feeling that, we've accumulated so many different things in so many different places. I'm just imagining and following what you just said. Now someone's maybe forced to make a decision that they haven't thought through. I'm going to stick to
Mhm.
just after the first person passes away. And it's an even more emotional time to have to unwind a lot of things and make these big decisions. So, while it is a little bit uncomfortable to kind of be somewhat proactive with that, I think it's not only for that emotional component that I'm mentioning, but tying back to something else you said. Okay, if maybe we're going to need a down payment for something different in a couple years and all my assets are tied up in the value of my home and IRAs, gosh, we got
Mhm.
to go to that IRA and pull out a huge lump sum. That's going to hurt from a tax perspective, where we
Yeah.
maybe could have been drawing out sooner or coming up with a different withdrawal plan. So I just
Yeah.
think having the conversations allows us as planners too to think for you proactively on, well, here's how we can adjust some of these variables to try to give you better options with wherever that takes you later in life.
Yes, that's it. I could not say that better myself. That's
So, so,
exactly the name of the game.
so give up while we're ahead. Thank you for bringing some financial wisdom to this. I know we came into this saying, this is not concrete. Here's, if A, then B financial planning. But gosh, start to have the conversation. That has to be the takeaway. And if that's going to include other people, the next generation, I know talking with, finances with family is not always the easiest thing, but gosh,
Mhm.
it's good to know what people need or are thinking or wanting, so that if that's an important input to you, that you share that with us, your planners.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your
All
time.
right. See you next time.
You got it.
Bye.
Hey everyone, Adam and I really appreciate you tuning in. Please note that the opinions we voiced in this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be most appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, your accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to making any decisions or investing. Thanks for listening.